So what I'm going to go over here today real quick is just how to bake a super simple normal map. Um, so the first thing we want to do is we want to have a high poly layer or a high poly object and a low poly object. We're going to bake the details from the high poly object onto the low poly object through a texture called a normal map. Um, so actually, let's pull up a normal map just so we can see what it looks like. So this is just sort of a kind of bad, actually, normal map, but it's going to look like this with blues, uh, some reds, purples, some greens. What it's doing is the RGB channel in that map are sort of telling the engine how to reflect light, and that's what a normal map can do. It can sort of take these details from a high poly object, it can put them through this texture, and it can make it look like there's more detail there than it really is. Here is, so just sort of a quick preview. I have a normal map on this of the one we just looked at, and if I move this light around, you can sort of see it moving around the twig, probably best, but maybe some of these bits of grass as well. And if I turn the camera, we can see that's completely flat, but it looks like there's actually some detail there. So what I have here is just probably what will be a better example of that than sort of what came out with the simple grass. So I'll just go through and we'll bake this. So here is going to be my high poly layer. One thing to notice between this is going to be my low here on my left. One thing you want to do, keep in mind, is you want your low to be close to your high. So if I had a significant amount of detail coming out here on the high poly kind of far, then I would want to reflect that in the low poly layer. Because this is sort of just a simple test, just putting a cylinder, we should be able to see the curvature of that cylinder pretty good on a flat plane. It shouldn't be too big of an issue here. It is helpful to put some of this stuff onto layers. So I have a couple of layers here set up already. This will sort of help us set up because you want your high poly layer to sit exactly on top of your low poly layer. If your bake comes out and your normal map looks just completely flat blue, then it could be an issue. Your objects aren't right on top of each other, but when you start getting into having really, really high, millions and millions of polygons sitting on top of your low in Maya, it can take a while, depending on your RAM, just to click it and see it show up. So it's nice to be able to just put it on a layer. I can click this button to add it to a new layer, or I can just right click this and add it to my high poly layer. So we'll hide that, and then we'll add this to the low. Let's bring this back. We'll just call this high poly plane. Call this low poly plane. Bring this back. So now, in order to go through this process, I want to bring up my transfer maps window. So I'm going to switch to rendering here. We're going to go to lighting, shading, and transfer maps. I've got some stuff set up here already. Let's clear that. We'll just clear everything out right now. Cool. So I'm going to want my source. I'm transferring my high details to my low poly. So I want my source to be those high details. So I have my high poly selected. I'm just going to add that. Now I can just click this V for visibility. I can hide it, select my low poly, and we'll just add that there. So my low is my target and my high is going to be my source. Now I'm going to want to create a normal map here. I'm going to want to change this file format. Typically you want to use PNGs or Targas. Let's go with a PNG. We'll save this out to the desktop. Make sure to say this is PNG again. And we'll just call this T underscore plane underscore normal. We're going to put this in tangent space, and that should be enough for just the normal map. We could also bake an ambient map, which will give us ambient occlusion. It's a nice shadow. It's a good way to sort of start texturing this. I guess we'll add that too. We'll make this a targa. And I'll call this T underscore plane underscore. We'll just call this AO for now. Save that out. I'm going to drop the, so it's going to be sort of bad quality because I want it to bake quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on that. So in my Maya common output, I have 1024 by 1024. It'll probably start you at 256 by 256, which is kind of small for today's settings. So I'm going to up that a little bit, and we'll try and get this to bake quickly. So I'm going to go low here. Now you won't see your mental ray settings unless you enable mental ray in your plugin manager here. So if I go Window, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, we can come down here to Maya to MR, and we can load this. Mental ray will give you a better bake, especially for like your ambient occlusion. So for sort of better results, you're better off going with mental ray. It's sort of a free open source render. We're going to transfer this in world space. I'll keep the settings low here. I do recommend upping your texture seams. One thing I should have mentioned at this point is you do want to make sure that you do your UVs for your low poly. You don't need to do them for your high poly, but you do want to make sure you have your UVs set up for your low poly prior to baking this. Because this is just a plane and it's a pretty simple example, it's not going to matter much. My UVs, if I unfold them here, they're not going to change. But if you have a character or something more complex, that will definitely matter. It's going to matter how it comes out. What you're filling your texture seams will do is it will sort of place, it won't put the changes in the normal map right next to your UVs here. If they are right next to it, you can sort of get bleeding that comes in, especially on an AO, and it sort of creates a seam which you don't want. So next thing I should mention here, let's go back, we definitely want to make sure we have our high poly turned on. And depending, I can up my search envelope here, so if I just click envelope, I can sort of get a look at how far out that's coming out. So I sort of mentioned this before. You want to make sure that your low is sort of relatively close to what you're trying to output with your high. So like right now, that search envelope should be a little bit wider so we can sort of get that. cylinder. But you want to be sort of careful about that. My low should probably be sticking out a little bit. But we'll try it now. It should be pretty simple. We'll see how that goes. If we need it to be bigger, we could make it bigger here, and we can sort of adjust those settings in the advanced options here. So if you're getting some bad results, if you want to clean them up a little bit, you could try upping your search method. That'll sort of help you out. Okay, so this should be good to go. I'm going to hit bake and close. This may take a little bit. Hopefully not too fast. Looks like it's going okay. And this window should close when it's done. Cool, it's going pretty fast. After we bake this map, I'll set up the materials, and we'll have to hit a couple of settings in order to be able to see it in Maya. So now that that's baked, let's hide our high poly, and we can sort of see it on there already. But I'm just going to give it a brand new material. We don't want to go with a Lambert because it won't really have shine, and the way a normal map works is we're reflecting light through a texture. So we want to make sure that our material is something that can reflect light. So we're going to go with a Phong, or we could go with a blend. I usually like to go with a Phong myself. Inside of where we're going to put the normal map is inside of this bump mapping slot in Maya. Bump mapping is usually more of a rendering thing. It'll add sort of detail, sort of like a normal map, but it adds it at rendering time. So we want to make sure, rather than using this as bump, when this comes in, we want to use it as tangent space normals, because that's what our normal map can read. I'm going to hit this arrow up here. It's going to send me back to here, then I'm just going to hit the arrow again, and then I can sort of browse for my normal map. So we've got the normal map in now, but we're still not really seeing it take effect. So what you'll probably see off the start is something like this, and it'll look like it's not working. We need to make sure that we enable visibility of textures, so you can do that by sort of hitting 6, or you can hit this sort of checkered icon in your viewport. That'll enable us to see textures. We also have to go up here to render in our viewport, and we have to make sure we hit high quality rendering. Then we'll be able to see this. But we're still sort of not done. So I'm going to create another light here. I have an older one in the scene there. So I have this light. We'll give it a little bit of a color. Green. I'm not really seeing the light on this. I'm not seeing this working, and that's because we're using Maya's default lighting scheme. So if I come up here to lighting in my viewport and I say use this selected light, we can start to see that now. My light is infinite right now, so I'm just gonna put it on linear so it'll have sort of more of a fall off, and then we'll sort of tone it down. So now if I move this light around, we can see it sort of affecting that texture. Pretty cool. And if I look flat, it's completely flat. This is just a 2 triangle plane, but with this normal map texture, it looks like we've got some more detail.